In today's podcast, we are going to be speaking about the best player in every zone of the pitch in the Premier League. So I saw this fantastic graphic from @DataAnalytic EPL, and it has far more zones than 18 zones, but we're going to use this as a bit of a reference point to go through the 18 zones of the pitch and discuss some players and talk about their threat in those different areas of the pitch. So let's start off with zone 1. And we've got Calvin Bassey.
He's been exceptional in so many ways since he's joined Fulham, and look, it's another one to chalk up for Marco Silva's rejuvenation clinic. Right, this is what we do. We bring in players who everyone has written off and go, there you go, you're now an excellent Premier League player. And Calvin Bassey is a very good example of this. I mean, he's so physically dominant, right? And it's not to reduce his game to that, because there are lots of different elements to it, but Fulham tends to play with a slightly higher line. He has incredibly good recovery pace. He's incredibly difficult to knock off the ball and aerially pretty solid as well, as kind of marked by his goal last week against Nottingham Forest. But I think what
Good header, that.
Yeah,
is a good header.
Underrated, yeah. But the direction, I thought he did really well there.
Yeah, he's just, I think the thing is, he's just very much become a mainstay. And look, Fulham lost Tim Ream in this area last year, and last season, Bassey sort of slowly replaced Tim Ream. Now, Tim Ream has been a kind of absolute servant to Fulham for the previous almost a decade. He'd been there for 9 years. He had been such a constant, calm presence in there. And look, the first time that Fulham got promoted to the Premier League, you know, in that kind of yo-yo years, he was exposed a little bit, but really grew as a player to the point where after a game against City at one point, we saw Pep Guardiola going over to him and saying, if you were 10 years younger, you'd be mine. and you know, that's just about the highest praise you can give him. And good luck to him having a great time in Charlotte now. But Bassey has made that transition seamless. And I think that's really impressive to kind of oust a stalwart and make yourself so crucial. But he provides so much of the kind of physical barrier that Fulham have here from a defensive perspective, because Joachim Andersen next to him is not particularly quick, and Anthony Robinson on his left loves steaming up the pitch, as we'll talk about later. Yeah. But the way that Fulham have operated with Bassey, sometimes playing more like a left back when there's been a 5 at the back, and you know, dropping into those areas and bursting forward with some really weird runs, you know, we really weren't expecting from him, but have kind of grown into. I think what we've seen from him is just, you know, a real acceptance that this is a good space for him. He feels very comfortable in the dressing room. Him and Alex Iwobi, very much the social leaders of this Fulham dressing room. I think he feels very comfortable in this system and with this team. And we've seen him grow into the player that a lot of people were really excited about when he first kind of made that breakthrough.
That Europa League with the season with Rangers. He was absolutely outstanding.
I remember watching when Spurs beat Fulham last season. Bassey was playing on the right-hand side of the defence.
It was his first game.
Yeah, he was incredibly easy to press, and that was kind of at the height of Angeball in those first 10 games. Spurs were super on it, and against a team like that, I think both goals came through Spurs kind of forcing turnovers on Calvin Bassey playing out from the back on his wrong side. But now you've just seen him kind of evolve into a player that feels a lot more comfortable playing on his natural side. And obviously, like, with the way that Fulham set up a lot of the time, sometimes away from home, and when you guys came to us this season, you've got kind of Iwobi from that right-hand side tucking in more as a right-back to support Castagna, and then that allows that Robinson to kind of just bomb on, and the balance of it just feels a lot better now with Bassey kind of playing in a space where he just feels a lot more comfortable. So it's been an incredible kind of rejuvenation for him.
I'm not surprised that he's in this area because he covers so much ground.
Well, that's it.
And I think that's really interesting, because this is basically the left side up to about the 18-yard box and down to the goal line, right?
Yeah, and I think you'll see this you'll see this on the other side. Because it's having to kind of go and recover the ball, but making sure you do recover the ball and then make sure you keep it. But then also probably when it comes to expected threat, having a team that works well down that left-hand side. Actually, let's go. We'll skip to. Well, we'll go through it quickly. So Pickford for Zone 2 has the second highest expected threat from the zone per 90, only behind Aaron Ramsdale. Second highest average length of pass, and actually for the goalkeepers, just super quickly, because it's generally talking about goal is slightly boring. No offense to any goalkeepers out there. It's interesting the two sides of it when we're talking about kind of expected threat is that you've got one in terms of Ramsdale of a team that his expected threat is higher because, first of all, when it comes to expected threat, it's like, how much from that position, passing from that zone, how much chance there is of scoring a goal from what
Is it for either
what
side?
comes from that.
Is that
I was
why
gonna
Ramsdale's
say,
in there?
I think Alex
But
McCarthy
it
would be
doesn't-
in there if
well-
it was for either side.
So what I wanted to look into, wasn't able to kind of get the stats straight away, is on the ball value, which basically takes expected threat, but they also like what actually happened when you did do the action.
Yeah.
And kind of at minuses one to the other. And from there, that can give you an overall score for you as a player. For Ramsdale in particular, with the amount of goals that they've conceded, I don't think he'd be here.
Yeah.
No.
But it shows more the style of it with Pickford playing those long passes. And there's something coming from that and his involvement, and Ramsdale in a different sense by playing it short.
This probably just shows you as well how much he was probably doing it under Russell Martin, because Juric has been at Southampton for quite a while now, actually, since I think he came in December, I think it maybe was. So it's like how much of this is weighted on those first few months of the season under Russell Martin, where he was kind of, and he spent a lot of time out injured as well.
Yeah, and maybe same for Pickford as well when you think of Sean Dyche.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting stuff there. Zone 3, kind of the opposite when we talk about Calvin Bassey, Konate. So second highest expected threat from this zone, behind Aaron Ramsdale. Often having to cover large spaces because of Trent, but again, you've got someone and a team and a whole side of the pitch where you're pretty effective with Salah and with Trent, and so that allows for Konate to be kind of in that zone and winning it when it comes to expected threat. 4.16 progressive passes per 90 and 3.32 ball recoveries and 3 aerial duels, 1 per 90. I think he's having a really underrated season for Liverpool, but just because there's louder names in there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Zone 4, Jed Spence.
My boy.
So, by the way, zone 4, we're now moving into that second line, but we're on the left-hand side here. But for how long will Jed Spence be on this left-hand side? Could his form put Pedro Porro's future at risk? Naturally, a right-back has played a lot of his minutes on the left this season. Udogie returning to fitness means Spence has moved over to the right-hand side, certainly for the Ipswich game. 3.23 progressive carries per 90. Sorry, progressive carries per 90. 2.5 successful take-ons. There's an interesting discussion with Jed Spence because his ability to play on that left-hand side, do you think could that hurt him in any way? Because my question to you would be this. He's been great on that left-hand side, but he's naturally a right-sided player. But if he's trying to be a first-team player, which at the start of the season would have been his aim, which one of those two has he got a better chance of kicking out the door?
That's so tough. That's really, really tough. I think from a personal perspective, just before that, it's really nice to kind of, in terms of his, well, I don't know, he has probably got a better chance, I think, of nailing down that right-hand side spot, probably, just because I think Pedro Porro gets exposed defensively by the system quite often because he's not got...
But is it the system or is it him? What do you think?
I think it's a blend of both, but I just don't think Porro has got the same...
But which one's it more?
It's probably the system, I think. It's probably 60-40 system.
Yeah,
I think
he was a wing back, right? Like, so that's where he made
Porro
his
was
name.
bought for a completely different... But to be fair, both of them were bought for a completely different manager. Both of them were bought for Conte, who wanted to play with right wing backs, and I think you can see the value...
Much to his disdain.
Exactly. Club signing, and we're here, what was it, 3 years down the line. I think he's probably... I don't think it's going to harm him too much if you think about his career prospects when you think about maybe England, because I think he should be in that conversation with the way that he's played over the last few months and that versatility that he's had to be able to play out right back and left back. That's problem solving for tournaments.
Really
And especially with Tuchel, kind of maybe, well, we don't know that Tuchel's going to play a back three or not. And if you think about, it's not the same way he plays now, but Jed Spencer's got on his CV that ability to play at wing back well, certainly on the right hand side at Forest. He has been a revelation for Tottenham. And I think one of the things that makes him so dangerous in this kind of zone is that picks the ball up often here so many times under pressure, but he's got that frame to be able to hold people off. He can turn on kind of a sixpence, which is even more impressive when he's not playing on the wrong side, to be able to kind of create that separation.
Did that to Mazraoui, didn't he? The other week?
He just go away.
Off,
He just go away. I'll hold you off.
Hand off.
Yeah,
Six Nations vibes.
Exactly. And he's just got that quick. He keeps the ball on the string, and then he can just burst. And I've always thought, I've said this for weeks, like we're going to see the best out of him from an attacking point of view when we see him go over to the right hand side because it just feels more natural. But scored his second goal of the season for Spurs, first league goal of the season, playing on that left hand side. Really nice interchange with Maddison and Odegaard. And what Spence does, being on the pitch for Tottenham in terms of that impact, is he just raises the kind of technical floor of this team. He can kind of play in tight spaces, playing on the wrong side. and just combine with players, and then he's just got that burst of acceleration to get away. He's just a bit of a, again, it's like nowhere near to the level of some of the other players that we've spoken about, but he's a bit of a cheat code for Tottenham. And the fact that we're going to hopefully unlock him even more when he does get more consistent minutes on the right. It's going to be back to the Porro thing. Porro is an excellent footballer. I don't think he's necessarily got the same, might be a bit lazy, but maybe the same appetite for defending as someone like a Jed Spence. But maybe
I've been really impressed by that side of it. I thought that might be something he was sort of wanting, because when I close my eyes, I think of Jed Spence at his best at Forest.
Just like
it's
flying.
just
Bombing,
he's gone, and that's where he's in a different planet to Porro. Porro's more of a passer. He's more of a crosser than Jed Spence. But
if Liverpool lose Trent. No, but you get Jed Spence going down that wing, you'll be all right. Like, it might suit the thing more. But like, just in terms of like when you're thinking about players that play with a slightly similar kind of aspect to their game, I wouldn't be shocked. Let's put it that way.
Also Porro as well for Liverpool potentially.
No, that's what I meant.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant Jed Spence. Porro, yes.
I think Jed Spence could work as well. I guess you got him and Salah. You got maybe too many people bursting. I don't know,
but Porro coming into that kind of more central zone, those little balls over the top. He's got that. We saw that for the goal against Liverpool in the Carabao Cup. But Spence has been fantastic. I think again in terms of nailing down the spot, I'm just glad from a personal perspective as a space in the space as a Spurs fan where we can kind of just be able to. There's so many conversations being had in the fan base about like what is Tottenham's best fullback pairing. I don't really care. I'm just glad that we've got three players that
they're all good.
Exactly, and Spence can play on either side. Doggy's come back. I think people have forgotten how good he actually is and how good he was last season. Porro again is young. Porro is a player that's just been running to the ground, and I think you've seen that in so many games where it might come across that he doesn't have that same appetite for defending. But there was a game actually we played against Fulham where he was just like, I've got nothing. And that was months ago. And he's just played basically every minute since then. So I think...
Just Reece Nelson running at him over
exactly.
and over.
I don't want to get drawn into that like wider conversation, but I'm just grateful we've got three really good options. But Spencer's just
one to play on both sides is perfect because it does give you that element. And look, we have it at Fulham at the moment with Timmy Castagna, who can play right and left back, do a job at both. And then you have first choices in Kenny Tete and Anthony Robinson. Now Tete is injured. Castagna's playing every week. That's fine.
No biggie.
But and I think you're absolutely bang on with your point about problem solving, about international tournaments.
Well, that's and just tactically problem solving fullbacks. I think they're becoming more important as a team, and actually, within a team, because teams are trying to kind of lock off one side of the pitch, and so with that idea, whereas previously you just had your two fullbacks, and maybe we're going to enter an era where you need 3-4 players to give you that kind of variance where sometimes you need a passer, sometimes you need a guy who like Jed Spence who can just go, well, no one's really trying to press me, fine, I'll run with the ball. Like having those different kind of players could be really, really interesting over the next year, and Tottenham have got a few, which is great. Zone 5, Nikola Milenkovic. Again, just to give you a picture, so this is the just outside the penalty box when you're sort of defending in a game. Milinkovic, where would Forest be if they hadn't signed Milinkovic this season? I know on this podcast I was sort of, I didn't know too much about him, and I was sort of saying, did they really, really need him? And I was then did more reading. You can never. Sometimes there's gaps in my knowledge, and you were like, actually, they did need him, and they have needed him. He's been absolutely fantastic. The balance between himself and Murillo has been brilliant, and they've obviously had an outrageous season in a sticky patch at the moment. We'll see if they can make their way out of it. But if he had been linked with Tottenham prior to that, it would be interesting to see like what would be the perception of him if he was playing in a Tottenham side where it's just so different.
Oh God, yeah.
To what he's dealt with Forest, because he's been great.
Yeah, weirdly, I said this actually about like because there were rumours. There weren't. I don't know how strong they actually were, but you've seen the problems that Tottenham have had when another centre back has been bought that is not the right fit at all for what Spurs want to do in Radu Dragusin, and I think Dragusin has been exposed again, a little bit like the conversation we were having before about Porro. He's been exposed by the system. He's obviously a young defender that's kind of come in from Genoa, who are playing a little bit more defending in their own box. Yeah. Yes, he can be progressive at times, but you're under so much more pressure to do that at Spurs. And then when we were talking about Man City in the last episode about having kind of players that can just kind of click in straight away and those patterns start to come back, we've seen that with Kevin Danso, who's far more brave on the ball. If you put Radu Dragusin in Forest's back line instead of Milinkovic, I think you see a very, very similar level of defender. it's just not the right fit. And then if you flip that round to Milinkovic coming to Tottenham, I think you can see that he's definitely got, as a baseline, he's got the heart of a really good defender, just wants to get his head on absolutely everything. But the way that Forest plays into that even more because they want to absorb pressure and then go.
He was quite a good ball player at Fiorentina. When he played in the sides under Italiano. He was quite a good player. But I do take your point, and they did try not to leave him exposed from a pace perspective, and that is something that I think the Dragosan has struggled with. So,
and then with Forest, when you put Murillo alongside him as well, that kind of covers that off as well, doesn't it?
Milenkovic is really, really impressive. But I am surprised that there's not a couple of players in it, and maybe it comes to that ability to play out from the back, and he does definitely have that in spades. I'm a bit surprised that there's not a couple of players here who like those kind of diagonal switches. You know, your Nathan Collins is at Brentford, your Joachim Andersons, Fabian Schär's. They're the players I would have expected, maybe, but perhaps because it's such a central zone and a lot of them split wide to do those things.
I think there's no exact science to this. We're kind of just touching on different players, but you're right. Like, you know, from that data perspective, and it is broken down that little bit more.
Yeah.
Like you say, the likes of Anderson and Schär are in there. Dunk is in a couple of zones here as well. Ethan Pinnock in there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that with it being the ripple effect, what we were thinking there was that it shows how important it is in terms of where you go. And it fitting you, because I agree with you. I don't think Dragoson's a bad player. I just think he's at the wrong club, it feels like.
Yeah.
Zone 6, Pedro Porro, highest expected threat in this zone. He's got 0.012, which is more than Alexander Arnold, which is interesting. 2.26 progressive carries. We've kind of touched on Pedro Porro, so we'll kind of move on from that one. We'll move over to Zone 7. So now we're kind of getting to the halfway line here. And Lewis Hall is our choice here. Expected threat in this zone per 90, 0.014. Much like with Spence, he has those problem-solving capabilities. Really good at everything. Defensively, I really, really like him. And, you know, as a fullback, you've got to be able to do that and deal with that. But also that left side for Newcastle, probably another reason why he's in here. It's a very, very strong side with Anthony Gordon. Isak stretching it for them as well in that channel at different times. I think he will quietly have an outstanding career, Lewis Hall.
Yeah.
I just think he's just going to go about his business and just be so...
he could be one of those players, like if it all goes well for Newcastle, we could be sitting here in 10 years, but Lewis Hall's still just doing his business. Like a Leighton Bainesy kind of career, just outrageously good, but no one kind of paid any attention.
It's going to be really interesting. Like, you know, the World Cup next year, that spot.
Jed Spence or Lewis Hall.
Well, that's the thing. We're saying it with Spence. There is a real, in terms of left backs, there is a real opportunity for a couple of players to come in and just make it theirs for the next. You think about Hall's obviously younger than Spence, but they're at such a great age where it's going to be like, you're thinking of the next 3 tournaments with both of those players. And I think we've moved past Luke Shaw. We've moved past Kieran Trippier as an option for the left back. You know, obviously Southgate liked to play in there. It was just not again. Yeah. So, yes, Lewis Hall is going to be like, be amazed if he's not the guy for the next 10 years competing with Spence as well.
Zone 8. So kind of on the centre circle, the defensive side of that centre circle. And Virgil van Dijk is the main man here. This stat is ridiculous. So first of all, talk about that switch. So him and Dunk in a few of these zones on this other graphic, but we've distilled it a little bit into 18. Lewis Dunk was in a lot of them, which shows the way that Brighton play. But for Liverpool, how good he is on the ball has come to prominence even more so this year. The way he strikes the ball has just always been gorgeous, hasn't it? But also, I think when you talk about expected threat, sometimes it's about actually winning your duel and getting it to one of your players, and then from there, you can counter press and something can happen. And 3.19 aerial duels, 1 per 90, a 71.7% success rate. That is just outrageous.
Keep it on the deck. Oh no, he's really good there as well.
Yeah.
I mean, what can you say about Virgil van Dijk? I think just
outrageous.
Yeah,
look, we mentioned it on the other podcast, but one of those things that when he had that drop off, you know, after the injury, and people were like, "Oh, is he done?" And you know, there was a couple of moments after that people were like, "He's nowhere near as good as he used to be. Will he ever get back there?" etc. And now you watch him, just the kind of presence of calm
Yeah.
in the middle of that Liverpool line. And look, I was talking about this recently in regards to Chelsea, I think, as a separate point, but it's worth kind of putting into this discussion. How much you have an impact on the players next to you is so huge. There is a reason that Jarrell Quansah looks like he might be an England centre-back for the next 10 years. And he might be, right? Like, I think Jarrell Quansah is excellent. But also, when you're given the tutelage and campaign next to a legend of the game who is still at his absolute peak, it must be so much easier. Whereas if you're coming into this Chelsea chopping, changing back line where everyone's about 24 years old, then it's far more difficult to one, establish a partnership, but two, to actually learn from the players around you. And I think that's important.
We sort of touched on it briefly in the last pod, but like we spoke about this idea of kind of maybe getting away from like this, what your best 11 is, but like at the core of your team you cannot do that, and that's where Chelsea have massively suffered, I think, in terms of like their goalkeeper and their two centre halves. They've not had that. They've not had that stability, and Liverpool have, all right, they got the injury to Konate, but again,
and to Alisson, but
to
Alisson,
but they've got the best backup
there,
exactly.
right?
Whereas Chelsea don't even know who the backup is and who the starting goalkeeper is. And like I noticed Levi Colwill was on here just a little bit behind Van Dijk. Colwill was such an excellent like line breaker, but he's not had the season that I think people maybe expected him to.
I just think I think there's a personality discussion here. Like I think Fofana has the personality that Chelsea team kind of needs. So yes, you've got that brilliance of Colwill.
He's apparently
on the
back
ball.
tonight, I think. His Southampton
I
game,
think I think him not being in a team is there's been a drop off there, and this is coming back to Van Dijk. I think he has both. Like, he has the ability to play the passes, to have the technical quality, but to also win every header that you go up
every
for,
duel,
and retain the standards of the whole team. We talk about Quansah or these other centre-backs. It's one where whoever that centre-back partnership is, they're in the car, but like Van Dijk's driving the car every single time. And what will be the problem is, if you take him out and you go, Quansah, you drive it. They don't know where they're going. Like Van Dijk knows how to navigate games and knows how to see and sense different references to go, you need to do this, you need to do that.
You'd hope they'd be looking at the streets whilst they've been driving around, right? So that when finally the time comes for them to actually get behind the wheel, that they're like, oh, I've watched us drive this route a million times. I know where I'm going.
Which I think is one of the biggest compliments that you could probably pay to Konate, because I think he probably has. Like, I think there would be a drop-off if he became the leader of that back line. But he has got character. He has got a lot of what Van Dijk has got, I think, and he's got that ability to bully players. Not many people get the better of him in individual duels when they drag him kind of into a channel. So I think Konate, it'd still be a drop-off, but I think Konate has been so brilliant at that. We haven't really seen it that much where he has to be the leader of that back line, but I wouldn't be as worried if now they've got Konate and he's developed over the course of the last 3 or 4 years.
Bedded in.
I still would be. I think it's the voice. I think he's so loud, Van Dijk. I think there's stuff that you can't see and obviously you can't hear it. That will just help you. It's just information that you don't even have to look, because when you hear that bellowing voice, you trust what's being said.
It's funny when you go to watch Liverpool, like if there's ebbs in the game where the crowd is a little bit quiet and you're sitting close to the pitch, you can hear every single word. Like Jordan Henderson. Henderson was exactly the same. You can hear every single word that he's saying.
Yeah, leadership.
There's a couple of other centre backs in here as well that are so interesting in terms of like, if you're looking at like not to get too granular, but like the half zones in between, like the centre, like the centre of the pitch where Van Dijk is. Like you look at like Zabarnyi, and then you look at Van Hecker as well on that kind of right hand side. Like Van Hecker is such a brilliant line breaking centre back, but he's not necessarily got. You see him kind of stepping up into those zones a lot of the time, but he's not necessarily got the recovery to go back. But he's so good on the ball. He'll be someone that I think will be on the radar of like a lot of bigger clubs kind of coming forward, and then Zabarnyi.
He'll cost a premium as well. Oh, it's Brighton, and that's what they do. Zabarnyi. I mean,
unbelievable.
So
the
good.
fact that Zabarnyi and Hyson together. Yeah, I mean,
it's just unlucky. It's just unlucky.
But him and Hyson together, the fact that they are starting
so
games
young
is ludicrous. Like that, and also the fact that Spain are going to potentially have Dean Hyson and Falcabasi as their centre back partnership for a decade is ludicrous.
Yeah.
Ludicrous.
Ashley Young, Zone 9. Congratulations.
Go on,
Yours. Go on, boy. I think there's a diag involved here, I reckon, at some points. Obviously, you could put what was it? Goodison Park? He set it up, didn't he? Get the ball over to Ashley Young. Pinged it the other
Less
side.
effective in the penalty area, as we saw.
Yes, very true. Yeah. Let's not go down that way. Still making 2.81 tackles per 90. Still going at 39. Give him a break.
Shouts
Very
out
rarely
Ashley.
dispossessed. 0.06 times per 90. Provides safety in this zone.
Very good at getting his body in front, isn't he, Ashley?
Yes.
Yeah. And falling over when you need.
I wasn't going to make the joke, but you
No,
done
yeah,
it.
for
So.
set it up,
I
yeah.
still saw from when he dove against Sean Derry for Man United a long time ago.
Yeah,
Quite fitting that Alex Ferguson was in the crowd on Saturday, wasn't it?
Yes.
It's like,
Yeah.
took me straight back to 2012.
See how that feels? Zone 10. This is interesting. Andy Robertson. The fact that he's not kind of further up in this talks to the tactics of Arne Slot and what he's kind of brought in and how his role has changed a little bit. He's actually had a lot of critique, Robertson, this year.
Yeah.
So, like, as I say, this is a sort of broad conversation based on expected threat of players in different areas, and it's just a vehicle for conversation, to be honest, so don't get too angry about it. But Andy Roberts being in that zone 10, which is the other side of the pitch on that left-hand side, I think is interesting because I think it shows, one, his ability to sort of counter-press from that position, but also the fact that previously you would have had Sadio Mane starting there and then maybe going over to the left-hand side and Robertson bombing on. Now it's an underlapping run. I don't know if you noticed him a few times just chilling in the penalty area, actually, against Manchester City. A different role for him. I think there's a broad feeling that his time might be coming to an end. I think he's somewhat exposed a bit more defensively, but that's, again, an Arne Slot thing, I think, at times, depending on the opposition that they're up against. But yeah, intrigued to see him in there and in a deeper zone this time.
I also think it's interesting as a kind of point of jumping off is to what Arne Slot and Liverpool are going to want from their next from their next left back.
Yeah.
You know, because actually him being further back in that slot and just over the halfway line in the kind of area that he provides the most danger is interesting because it suggests that he's not, spending that time flying out down that side anymore. Yes, obviously he tucks inside a little bit, but someone like Milos Kerkez, who has been someone that I think has been linked with Liverpool already, but also kind of just thought has been a good fit for a while.
Yeah.
But he likes to go down the old outside, Milos
I was going to say,
Kerkez.
do you think he would not get in Gakpo's way a little bit?
Maybe a little bit, but also I think Cody Gakpo likes to come off that side, right?
Yeah, he likes to kind of hug it and then just come in, doesn't it?
So actually, I think in terms of, weirdly, it's one of those strange ones, and I think this has been an interesting kind of dynamic this season. If you have Kerkez there, you want a Gakpo-esque player on that side. You probably don't want a Kerkez there with a Luis Diaz playing on the left-hand side because he wants to go on the outside of his player quite a lot of the time. So, how that matches and how that all ties up, I think is a really intriguing thing for Liverpool going forward because they will have a new left-back next season. Now, whether that's as a starter or a rotation piece to kind of come through, I don't know yet. But
I think
they
part of
will
the
have
optics
someone.
defensively with Robertson and people going and not enjoying him as much or thinking he's a bit of a liability is that the press isn't as outrageous.
Yeah.
So when the press isn't as outrageous, where you're making your defensive actions are higher up the pitch.
Yeah.
Whereas now, or there have been moments this season where it's further back, so you are one-on-one and you're going to get cooked every now and again.
Yeah.
And I think that's hurt at times. Zone 11. We found a midfielder. Yuri Tillemans, Aston Villa.
Nice.
Love him. Love him. So progressive for them. 6.85 progressive passes per 90. 6.81 passes into the final third. That creative hub for Villa, but also just play it quickly. He's got 4.44 ball recoveries per 90, which is strong. 2.65 tackles per 90 again. Strong ability to stop transitional moments, but also when he gets it, just give it to Rodgers, give it to Asensio, give it to those players in those half spaces quickly. Which I think he's got a kind of, he's not Alonso, of course he's not, but profile wise, maybe touch similar in terms of being able to just get it and give it.
Yeah,
I think there's
just
still
a bit of a tempo setter, isn't he? And also you've seen he
still
can
value in that.
He can be super progressive. Also, I think was it Tielemans that got the assist for? It was against Man City earlier on in the season. Played that lovely ball through the lines, got it back straight away, wins it, gives it through the lines against Man City.
Yes,
where John Duran scored. That was an exceptional ball, but a lot of the time it is just about kind of and you don't want to pigeonhole him just into that, but
No.
it is just about giving
And
it to
you've seen
Rodgers.
goals and stuff like that.
Yeah, give it to Rodgers and then drive, and then it's just it's often him that is just the centerpiece of that, even if it's just about a 5-yard pass.
I was sceptical of this move as well.
Yeah.
I didn't.
It took him a minute, didn't it?
Just before it happened, I wasn't sure that he was going to bring what Emery needed in terms of intensity in that midfield.
Yeah, when you think about Kamara and Onana, especially,
but even Douglas Luiz, right? What Douglas Luiz brought from both on either side of the ball, And you're thinking, is Yuri Tielemans really the guy that's going to step up into that and win the ball? But you've read off the numbers already.
Yeah.
We're seeing some really, really good numbers from him this season. He's been really impressive. And just the way that he's picked up a bit of a leadership role within this camp as well, I think is important because, Villa didn't spend the money that I think a lot of people expected them to in the summer. They get to the Champions League, they sell Douglas Luiz, and everyone's like, okay, when's the big names coming in? And they didn't. They did a lot of flipping for PSR, and I know that it wasn't their own choice.
Yeah.
But then suddenly they get
figured
that
it out.
They get that in January, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. The names have arrived.
Yeah.
And Tielemans has kind of established himself as a centre point in this team.
We talk about money spent. Tielemans was a free transfer as well, right? Wasn't it? When you think about the value of that, it's just crazy.
Been very cute, Villa. Very, very cute.
Yeah.
Zone 12. Back to the right hand side. Trent Alexander-Arnold. Interesting to see him kind of there. Obviously, that's those long diagonal balls that he can provide and the quality he can provide. I think he's quite unique in that sense. We've spoken about Porro, but still, for him to do that damage from deep and what he can do, be it playing the ball into Salah, stepping in and putting in a great cross, or switching it over to that left hand side, it's one where I'm intrigued to see when are the sort of pinch points next season if he isn't there. Where you go, God, we could have done with him and even like the Man City game, Doku does him. Kind of, so what? Because 1-1-2, and that pass is actually harder than people think.
Yeah.
And you see that all the time. And I think it's something, say like David Beckham, there was a similar thing. I know Liverpool fans get annoyed when I compare the two, but the point I'm making is that David Beckham, like physically very average, but just to be there's so much to be said about the ability to, in 2025, to affect the game with one kick.
Yeah.
And I think he has such vision that it is such a joy. Zone 13. So we've got a couple here, but there are a few names you could talk about. Cunha or Rodgers, we could put in here. Cunha often starts on the left for Wolves, but he's got that freedom to drive.
Top of the box on the left-hand side going forward.
Sorry?
So like top of the box on the left-hand side going forward.
This zone, yes, thank you. So not down. No, we're not in the penalty box yet. We're in that middle third of that right half. Christ. So yeah, we've got Rodgers and Cunha here. Cunha often starts on the left, has that freedom to drive inside. Do you know? I watched him and his interview after the game against Bournemouth, and I just thought, are you going to be there long? Like you're not going to get. I feel like he's been so great and so underrated. Can he? I'd hate to say that, and I'd be so annoyed if I was listening to this. Can he stay happy there?
I think that new contract was kind of just a vehicle to get a release clause in there that gets him out
get a
in
good
the summer.
number.
Yeah, I think it's like 60 million. And you think about the teams that would pay 60 million in a heartbeat for Cunha.
It's been superb this year.
It's unbelievable. And it's not a surprise to see him and Rodgers basically on exactly the same kind of expected threat in that zone. It's just, especially given the kind of context of the conversation that we've had about like the way that recruitment is going and the way that style is going and the way that transitional football is kind of becoming almost the meta and having those ball carriers in there. But Cunha, what he does on top of that, and again, I said it about someone earlier, about you don't want to just pigeonhole them. Oh, it's actually about Rodgers, about pigeonholing them into just being a good ball carrier. Cunha's creativity and ability to think quickly and just make something out of nothing a lot of the time as well is what sets him apart from so many of the other players that kind of want to do the same thing. He's just ridiculous.
You've got to be really careful if you buy Matheus Cunha. I've got a thing about this. I love him as a player, but at Wolves, he's been given the keys to the castle and go on and do what you want. So, there was kind of a stretcher game. So he was at Hertha Berlin and he was excellent after leaving Leipzig, and he kind of shone there and did enough in that period at Hertha to get Atleti to buy into him. And it just didn't work because he went into a Simeone system where he wasn't given the keys to the castle, funny that. And he basically was just like, do the hard yards. And he really struggled at Atleti. And then, finally gets out with this move to Wolves, originally on loan, and then he comes here. And at this point, it's like, okay, cool. You are now able to be the man. You are the biggest fish in the small pond. And that's not with any disrespect to Wolves. You're just the biggest name at the club at this point.
Player, isn't he?
And the best player at the club. And I think that with that, there's a real sense of Cunha, we will work around to get Cunha in the best potential spots for him to have a look at goal or for him to, to create into these areas. And I think he's quite enjoying playing with Jurgen Strand-Larsen as well.
Yeah. He's back as well now.
Yeah.
I think overall it's starting to come together a little bit. Like Bellegarde as well, like different players that can then create that little bit of space for you. And Morgan Rodgers, I would say, probably one of the rising stars or a star that has risen the sort of greatest this year in terms of
Supernova.
a name we weren't really talking about last year, and really fun to watch, and an utter duck to water this season. He just looks so competent throughout.
Very similar to Cunha, where it's not just about that ability to drive; it's about the skill that comes with that and the end product. Because we weren't talking about him as much last year, but it did click quite quickly for him, though, didn't he? He scored. I think he got about 5 goal contributions, 5-6 goal contributions last season. And again, when you think of the money that he was picked up for, like, there were just so many gems just sitting there in the Championship. Just kind of, it shouldn't just be that kind of pond for the big clubs to just fish in, but you think about the potential upside of these players.
Right?
Yeah, and Rodgers was very smart. And again, it kind of comes back to what we were saying about Tielemans. Villa have just been clever. They've been super, super clever. It's weird with Cunha, actually, when you think about Rodgers and Villa, because when you were saying there about being careful with Cunha, he has got the talent and ability to play for any of the clubs that would be interested in him. But if you're thinking about fit, where does he fit at Chelsea or Liverpool or Arsenal maybe? If you're thinking about a bigger club that might go in, Villa are probably the best fit for Cunha.
I guess it depends what happens this summer.
They're still playing the wide 10s.
Yeah.
They're playing the wide 10s, and that's a really nice space.
And they've got to move house.
I do wonder if he'd actually be very, very good as one of the two behind a striker for Amorim's United.
I think that, yeah. I think they should be looking at someone like him or Eze or someone. Sorry.
I can't understand how... well, obviously, I understand they haven't got any money, Man United, right now, but the Eze one is so obvious to me.
Yeah. Literally a banker.
It just feels like he's perfect for them.
Yeah.
Anyway, Zone 14, which we speak about a lot. So, a ripple here. Is the current meta to defend in a low mid-block causing stereotypical Zone 14 players to drift elsewhere? The likes of Cole Palmer or Thogden, who we've kind of put in here. You've got Odegaard dropping deeper, although he kind of always drifts over to that right-hand side anyway, and quite a functional Arsenal team at the moment. Palmer dropping deeper for Chelsea as well. The ability to receive in tight spaces, find creative passes, create a yard for themselves, and then get shots from outside the box. And I think add into the fact that sometimes you want to be transitional because teams can get back into that mid-block really, really quickly. I think there's something in this, to be honest. It's because Cole Palmer's struggling a little bit at the moment. And in his last 14 games, he created 32 chances. He's created 32 chances, 6 big chances. 0 assists. I mean, I guess with assists, it's on the player as well to score them.
Someone has to put your chances away.
Yes, that's true. But yeah, funny. Yeah, it's a funny time, I think, for
Death of the 10, is it? We've done this before.
I swear 2 weeks ago, the 10 was back.
Yeah.
I think it's how you create that space. I actually think it's, when we're talking about those 10s, it comes back to, like, how do you create that space between the midfield and the defence?
Yeah.
And that actually has to kind of come from your forward. So Nicholas Jackson not being in the team it makes life harder because you've got such a willing runner there that can do it with authenticity. And what I mean by that is, I think sometimes if a proper target man pretends he's going to run the channels, generally I think the defence, they don't really fall for it.
No.
But if Isak or Nicholas Jackson or Haaland goes, you go, oh fuck. Like this is a problem, and so that can create that lovely gap in the middle, which is so important for those players to deal with. And the other thing I would say, what Marmoush we were talking about in the earlier podcast, Cole Palmer, starting on that forward line and then stepping into that area there, you can kind of run into that space, pick it up, move, and create something.
It's not new, right? Like, you can go back all the way to like mid-90s Serie A. I'm sure you can go further back than that. But for me, like Batistuta, Rui Costa, right? Like, who was doing the stretching? Yeah, of course. You got number 9 in there who's willing to run in behind. Yeah, ideally you have a striker who can do everything, right? But there aren't loads of them around.
I do think there's. I had that. Yeah, as I said, people saying there's not strikers. Like sometimes you can play. Like Liverpool kind of proved you can play without a striker, but you still have to have that guy who's stretching that back line as far
Jones
as possible.
or Szoboszlai.
Yeah,
they're just two very tactically intelligent players, and I think that helps, right? If you have two people that know exactly how you read the game, then
and willing runners to come and help out as well. But you got to get on your bike. I think you got to play with a bit of tempo to you.
Yeah.
And I think for Man City in particular, when we look at Foden and you think of the drop off from last season to this season, a huge part of it is the tempo of passing. Like the amount of times over the last couple of weeks we've taken kind of screenshots of how Man City have struggled. Everyone's just standing. Everyone's just on their heels.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see it improve slightly now Nico Gonzalez is there, because I feel like he's just got that cute little round the corner pass to find Foden in those half spaces. Because I defended Foden a lot in the summer, where it was like there were so many accusations of him just being a system player, and why is it not working for England if he's got the individual quality to just put him anywhere? But where they're not, that City aren't moving the ball quickly enough or stretching teams enough to find him in those little pockets. And it's kind of like with Palmer as well. Like Jackson is such an excellent foil for Palmer to just be able to stretch that defence to allow Palmer to drop deep, and then you've got Neto who wants to go in behind the fullback. They just haven't really been able to do that. It might just also be the fact that teams are, I think it's definitely a big Jackson thing, but that teams are also starting to figure Chelsea out a little bit. You look at what Brighton did in each fixture against Chelsea at the Bridge. They went and pressed them so aggressively, it was risk reward, because they actually got one of the goals from pressing Robert Sanchez and forcing an error. But when you've got Caicedo in there, and I think Lavia was in the team at the time as well, who can just play that ball so quickly, find Palmer on the halfway line, and then you've got Madueke, Jackson and Neto who just want to go, and that's where Palmer's threat of that just lovely ball in behind comes in as well. Scored 4 goals in the first half in that game. Then last Friday, Brighton had 30% of the ball against Chelsea, just let them have it, and when they've not got Jackson, who's that presence that's going to stretch it a little bit more, it's just not. Do
you know what it is, mate? I think it can't just be one person anymore. You need you use the word foil there. You need the 10's not dead, like obviously not, but you need Morgan Rogers needs Watkins to stretch it.
Yeah.
You need these different players to help you.
Is this where two striker systems start to come back?
I think so.
I saw this,
but it's the second striker. I think it's
I
could like Marmoush. I don't really think of him as a striker. I think of him as a second striker.
Yeah,
but that is just big man, little man, right? Like in some ways, that is Quinn and Phillips.
I think it's more. It's more Shearer Sheringham.
Yeah.
Then
all right. Then Quinn and Phillips.
Also, a bit like speaking of Spurs experience, like Keane and Defoe. Keane was like that one that would drop off a little bit more and create, and then Defoe's running the channels and running in behind. I wonder if that just does start to kind of creep back in.
I think this is what I mean. It's sort of duality of threat. Like, so that's what I like about Marmoush is the fact that, and he does it constantly, is that he drops deep and can drop deep, and he'll get on the ball there. But he's so willing to go that way and then go the other way.
Yeah.
So when you're worried about them going both ways, as a defender, you go both ways, and that's how you can start to move about your opponent with your movement.
Just on Palmer before we move on, one of the things I've been really intrigued by is Palmer's positioning on a pitch, and so much towards the drop off of this end of Chelsea season, we've seen Palmer drifting into the left half space, which I don't think suits him at all.
No.
We saw Palmer excellent on the right-hand side, but even better when he came into 10. But once he was drifting out to that side so that he can cut inside on his left foot, because we know he can shoot, that's fine. But also there's kind of dinked balls into the box, and we'll come on to it, I'm sure, when we're talking about, whoever's in zone 15. But I do think that Palmer's effectiveness has been curtailed by the fact that he's clearly been instructed to focus on playing in that left half space that I just don't think suits him whatsoever, or doesn't get the best out of him.
Which can also become a bit crowded when you think about Cucurella's position as well.
Enzo being knocking about there as well at different times.
But I think it was supposed to free. I think the whole thing was supposed to free up Enzo on drifting into the right so that he could activate in that space, but it hasn't really worked. And it felt like Maresca didn't find a solution and just was like, "No, keep trying until it works." And it didn't feel like it was ever going to work.
When it comes to zone 15, there's a few runners and riders here. So Palmer, I think, is within that. Porro, we've spoken about. Salah, who's obviously a big talking point. Alexander-Arnold and Odegaard as well. Just wanted to touch on Odegaard for a second. We've spoken about Salah in detail in the first podcast. If you want to listen to that, make sure you do. We know he's outstanding. I think what's interesting here is that, and as I say, we've been referencing two different things here. One, the 18 zones for us, just to make it a bit simpler. But the data analytics EPL picture that we've got here. And Salah is only in that zone. And I think that, for me, is really interesting because it shows, and if you go and look at his heat map from the game against Man City, obviously Man City have the ball the bulk of time, but Salah was still such a threat. And the reason he is such a threat, no pun intended, is the fact that when he gets the ball in that zone, but you've also got a team that can get the ball to him in that zone and almost indulge him to ensure that he gets the ball in that zone.
Yeah,
he can do huge damage, and so you don't. And because he could, that's the thing with Salah as well. Yeah, I can off the top of my head, I can think there's a Curtis Jones goal where, and the amount of assists that we've seen from him this year. Him sort of going left is one thing, and he can put that cross in for Gakpo. I think he's done it for as well at different times. But he's also still got that ability to go right as well or shoot as well. So just
there was
absolutely.
the one was it against Chelsea where Jones beats Sanchez to it and Salah just dinks it over the top for him. It's just like,
that's it. Like he's so potent from that exact spot, and that's why he's not in any other spots. Whereas there's another name on the left-hand side that you can chuck in there, but you kind of go, I don't think they're that threatening. And that name is Martinelli. So we'll step into zone 16. We can kind of touch on Arsenal here maybe with Odegaard as well, because Odegaard's getting a bit of heat after the disappointing performance against West Ham. And when we're talking about Foden and Palmer and those players that can get it and take a player out of the game, or someone who's a bit more of a system player, I think that has been revealed somewhat with Odegaard.
Yeah,
that he's not I think you need dribblers in central areas these days. And as great as Odegaard is, I think he's really hurting from not having
that network. Ben White and Saka on the right. There was a moment in the West Ham game where I think it was in the second half where they were trying to break forward. He plays the ball down the line to Martinelli, and then everyone was getting on his back for not making that run inside and kind of just drifts into the space where all of the players are, or the West Ham defenders are. And it's like, I felt a little bit sorry from that aspect because he's also not got the pace to outrun Wan-Bissaka to get him behind him. So I kind of understand what he's doing.
He's trying to take someone away, isn't it?
Exactly. But the problem is that Arsenal haven't got, we come back to like ball carriers or players that want to run off the ball and have that energy. They haven't really got that. And I think maybe that's where their kind of recruitment strategy of not focusing so much on the attack over the last few years has actually come back to bite them a little bit.
Yeah, I guess it's like it'll all come out in the wash in the sense of this time next year. Are we going, right, they'd sorted they'd realised they've got an incredible defence. They then worked on the set pieces and all that stuff. And then the final thing was, last summer, wasn't it, where they bought 1, 2, 3 players and then they had their cheat codes aside from Saka, so there wasn't the same burden on him. Yeah. I think that's certainly been revealed this year that there's been a regression to Martinelli, who, as I spoke about, has got one of the highest expected threats on that left-hand side. I think the reason for that is more Arsenal's ability to work the ball up the pitch and suffocate. But
also, talking of ball carriers, I do think that Mourinho was supposed to come in and help sort this. Not necessarily because he is a brilliant ball carrier. He's a perfectly fine ball carrier. But I think what was supposed to happen was when this midfield settled, and I think they've realised they haven't quite got this right, which is why there are all these links to Zubimendi. Yeah. But I think it was meant to be so that basically, one of the things that I've always thought about Declan Rice is he's a wonderful player in many different ways. Start from having zero loyalty to anything or anyone. He's been a very, very important player, but he doesn't like getting the ball on the half turn and getting out of there, right? And being able to carry. And I think Mourinho was meant to come in to basically allow them to rotate almost in who was playing at the base, so that Mourinho could pick the ball up in possession in there and play as a 6, and out of possession Declan Rice could still be destructive, but in possession give him the freedom to kind of break forward and move with the ball. That was, I think, what the idea behind it all was.
Saw it in the City game quite a lot, didn't you, where Odegaard was the deepest in build-up quite a lot of the time, like getting the ball off of Raya and kind of then allowing Rice that space to kind of go forward.
Yeah, and I just don't. It hasn't quite come to fruition now for various reasons, and players having to play elsewhere, etc., etc., etc. Fine, but I do think it's going to be interesting to see what they do in those areas, and if Zubimendi does come in, does that just push Rice into an 8 role, and therefore do you have a carrier in there that's going to change things up and maybe make it look a bit different? I think you're right though on Odegaard. I feel a bit sorry for him because, when you have a player who can carry or beat a man or absolutely skim on, even if it's a player who is a far less quality, let's say a Adama Traore or an Alejandro Garnacho, who is going to be able to just knock the ball down the wing and carry it and get your team up the pitch. Odegaard doesn't have that. Now, Odegaard is a far superior player to both of those. But if the players aren't around him, he's not able to spin his web. Right? He's not able to actually do it. And therefore, when you are the creative hub, in inverted commas, and also the captain of a side, you're expected to be the one driving. You're like, no, I work with players. I don't do the players. Like, that's
I think maybe... So this is, someone sent this to me. I won't say who, but he said the light is shining on a few who are maybe not the alpha males we thought they were. And, that's kind of on... There's a thought that that's on Odegaard. I think maybe... thing with alpha male being a good thing is sometimes a good thing. Yeah. Sometimes it's not. And I think there's maybe some truth in that with Odegaard, that he's not the alpha male, but it doesn't mean he's not got the gut for it.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
I think he certainly does. I just think the spotlight is so on him, and I think it's so binary in the sense of winning or losing.
Yeah.
And because Arsenal don't seem to be able to overpower in quite a fluent way when it comes to goal scoring right now, you then go, right, who should be solving this issue?
Yeah.
And he's not right now.
Yeah, I think he scored one non-penalty goal since last April.
Yeah, I mean,
so the output's not there, and I think.
But the output has been there, hasn't it? So he's not like... I always want to defend him because I think he's great.
Also, he's more than just goals and assists, but equally that is not good enough. You're right.
It's the thing. It's like a lot of midfielders like that just get judged entirely through that lens, which is not fair to a player like Odegaard. But when it was so good, you have to ask the question, why is that? Like, a lot of my Arsenal friends are kind of just, even there, like, who were defending him a few months ago when maybe that was the case, were like, I don't know what's happened to him. But when you look at the end of that West Ham game, they weren't quality chances, but the moments that they were creating to try and break down that low block with 10 men, they still came through Odegaard. Like that little back flick to Ben White, the shot across the box. They're low percentage kind of chances, but he's still the heartbeat. And I don't know, maybe now Ben White's back, and if Nwaneri becomes the prominent figure on that right-hand side while Saka's out, maybe they can just try and patch things up and recreate the Saka, White, Odegaard triangle. Yeah, maybe.
Interesting. Anthony Robinson, Zone 16. Come on.
Let's get it.
Double Fulham representation. Do you think you'll be able to hold on to him? No, stop. Let me go. I'm not doing that.
No, but I think, I think it's a fair question,
I don't want to fucking do that.
It's a fair question.
I find myself keep doing that, going, oh, well, good player, must leave.
No, but I don't mind it because he's 27, right? He's 28 at the end.
That was kind of my point.
He's 28. I don't think anyone's going to pay the money for a 28-year-old that Fulham are going to demand for it.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at. Like, and also, especially with someone who's, his mechanics are unbelievable in terms of like the way that he moves, right? But equally, if that breaks, it could really break. And I really hope that I'm wrong, and I hope he plays for another 10 years at the very top level, right? But when you are, and he has been absolutely remarkable in terms of the way that he recovers, and in terms of his body, his stamina. He is a real. I mean, he's one of the best players as a left back that I've ever seen at the Cottage, obviously. But just so crucial to this Fulham team. And I just wonder if someone is going to be like, am I actually going to pay 50, 60 odd million for...
I guess how much would you kind of...
I think if someone put 50 on the table, Fulham would probably say yes. Like, I hope they would say no, but I think they probably would say
Do you think
yes.
it's this summer or it doesn't
I think
happen?
it's this summer or bust. Like, it's kind of like, I don't think you're going to do that for a 29-year-old who records on those mechanics.
And also, you're probably helped out
2028.
Yeah, it was a decent contract. So he signed a 4-year, last season.
You could push that to 60, probably, couldn't you? Like a little bit. And also, it's probably helped by the fact that Kirkes is there as well. Like someone
at 22, right?
Yeah, there's an obvious alternative. If someone wants to go in for Robinson, it's like, okay, let's now move straight away to this guy.
Yeah.
It's not for Liverpool, maybe it's not Robinson or bust, because that feels like the most obvious fit. And we obviously talked about Kirkes for Liverpool earlier. Like, it might help Fulham that there is an obvious younger alternative on the market.
He's been brilliant for 3 years. And you know what? You talked about some interesting things, but here's a ripple for you.
Yes.
Anthony Robinson was born in Milton Keynes. If Anthony Robinson had played for England, would England have won the last Euros?
Oh my God.
Probably.
How much better would it have been? How much better would it have been?
So much better.
I think you probably would have. And I'm saying that as someone who is kind of neutral.
Yeah, no, 100% we would have.
Like, I think...
I mean, the dollop of balance it would have provided.
Imagine Grealish and Robinson on that left-hand side, someone who wants to just retain the ball and then just let someone just go around him. It's just like...
Yeah. Or even, like, Foden would have been just like...
He's got
they all would have been fighting to play over on that left-hand side, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been a game changer. He was at Everton as well, wasn't he? Does everyone
He was as a
that?
youngster before he went off, and then he went to Wigan.
Yes.
And then nearly to Milan. You must never forget that he nearly signed for AC Milan.
Of course, that must be spoken about every time we talk about Anthony. I think the great thing about him, and I hope he doesn't go, because what I really like, I like different kinds of squad building, and I really like Fulham's squad building. I think it's bang on. I think it's the best Fulham side you've seen during the Premier League era. It's been a similar vibe here, where like they're really good players, but don't seem to be able to be valued or first team players out and out for Arsenal or whoever it may be. And so come here and have a great career. And I like the fact that they're just a touch older, like the Iwobis or Smith. I mean, Smith Rowe maybe a bit younger, but they're really good pros that have got time. You know, we're sort of saying 28 like it's too old. That's you still got 4 years, and you can still all kind of grow, stick together, and maybe do something.
We can look at 36-year-old Willian as the example.
You got 8 years, Anthony.
Uncle Willian is back, so that's good. But no, look, I think Fulham's squad build has been really impressive, and actually, you're right. Picking up those kind of players who are just on the verge of being kind of cast off from the big clubs is a smart way of doing business. The only thing I would say is that Fulham potentially need to be a little bit more versatile in their squad building, right? Like, and it's all good. Now, Anthony Robinson is such a crucial part of it. And if you have a player of that quality, you want to utilise him as much as possible, which is why he's here.
Not cost you much, is he, Anthony Robinson?
Well, no, not at all. But like, actually, where he is here is in the kind of graph is he's at the very, very top, right? This is a byline, hit the byline defender. Now, his crossing still isn't brilliant. The problem is he gets there before everyone, so he can swing. When they go low across the box before when he's playing with a backline scrambling, that's fine. That's not a problem. When he has time to sit and think on the ball, and his crossing isn't great, and that's why I think Liverpool would probably stand off. Right. One, maybe age profile, but two, those left backs are asked to swing the ball in from deeper areas at a more regular base.
Robertson, you could just picture Liverpool 5 years ago. Robertson in swinging deep cross to Firmino, just glances it in. Robinson hasn't really.
No, doesn't really have that in his locker.
Yeah.
Erling Haaland is zone 17, the best box striker in the world? Yes. Probably. Purely dominating the 18-yard box. My question with Haaland is: so 19 goals in 25 appearances in the Premier League this season. Is this the worst season he'll have?
I don't know. Purely from a numbers perspective.
The question obviously is, if he gets injured or not. But is this the worst we'll see from him in the season?
I don't. Purely in terms of output.
Yeah.
I don't know, because next season. I mean, next season. If you think about how him and Marmoush might play together, Haaland could become a little bit more sacrificial. Yeah. And then it's like, but then again, it's like we were talking about Salah earlier. It's like if Haaland has another poor year in terms of output next year because he's playing that role, it's probably still going to be like 25 goals, isn't it? It's just like he set the bar so high. But he could be. When you think about the evolution of City, it's like it might not be his worst. It might not. It might be next year he gets 20, and it's like But then his assist numbers might go up a little bit, or the sort of stuff that he does off the ball unlocks Marmoush a bit more. So I don't think so. I think we might see. The worst is yet to come.
I think
worst. The worst best is yet to come.
It could be better for the team as a whole. Like the hat-trick goal for Marmoush, Haaland's at the back post, and the two centre-backs for Newcastle, they're just looking at Haaland. Yeah. They're just worried about Haaland, so they both just go over to Haaland. So there's this big space in the.
But the thing is that as soon as that starts to work, people will clock onto what's happening, and then suddenly it opens up for Haaland again. Yeah. You're like, oh no.
Exactly. Yeah, totally right.
So maybe,
And finally, zone 18, Mohamed Salah's back again. But
Can I ask a question actually to Ben on this? Because actually, I think it would have been a really interesting one that Brennan Johnson here.
I was looking for Brennan.
Yes, I do. So don't worry, that's where I'm going. So, but in the more extensive visualization we have, there's a few other names here. We've spoken about Salah. You're all aware that he's really good. So let's talk about some other players, because in these sort of zones, you've got Foden, Diallo. Interesting. Do you know what? Earlier today, I was looking at that and I read it Delo.
I was like, what's he doing there?
What? Jacob Murphy.
Yeah,
this is worth a quick nod to Jacob Murphy. He's done really, really well, and Eddie Howe in terms of getting the best out of the team.
Time to declare for the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah,
come on. So a couple of kick around, a couple of years, be a lot of fun.
The Rodrigo of Newcastle.
Indeed.
The sacrificial piece.
And Brennan Johnson.
Yeah.
So Murphy and Johnson, if you stay with them for a second, very, very, very different kinds of players.
Yeah.
But both offering threats in different ways.
Yeah, Johnson's a final action player. That's why I was quite surprised to see him that high and wide almost, even though that is his role.
I agree.
Kind of like off. Well, I mean, he scored 2 goals at the weekend just by arriving into the penalty area in that kind of more central zone where Haaland would be. Like first-time finishes are his bread and butter from coming in from the right. But he is also, there are times where Spurs play a little bit more in transition and Porro or Kulusevski is able to kind of find that little ball through the lines and then he can just whip that ball across first time, a little bit like what you were saying about Robinson. So maybe it's not that much of a surprise to see him out there. But this season, it has become a lot more about the final action. He's got 17 goal contributions this season in all comps. And I did say the last time I was on, he was going to get 25.
Oh, right, yeah.
And he could be right up there. And I think Johnson, there's so many conversations that happen in the Spurs fan base about the transfer generally and about was he worth the money and all that kind of stuff. In terms of pure footballing ability, probably not. But like you can't put a price on that output. Like if he gets 25 goal contributions in all comps consistently over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, that's £50 million easily.
We were talking about Porro earlier, and I was saying, is it any kind of deficiencies? Is that the system or is that the player? Flip it with Brennan Johnson. The success this year, is it you're just getting a right guy who's generally the right role to play in that role? Is that why he's getting those numbers, or is he getting it because he's a good player?
I think it's probably again more about the system being geared up for him to score
again,
goals. Yeah, it's probably 60-40, but you don't want to take away the knack that he's got. That is a skill. That is a real kind of skill. It's like you think about Raheem Sterling at Man City, but kind of coming that penalty box winger that would come in off that left-hand side and just be that final action guy at the back post. And that's what Johnson has become. And I think it's a weird one with Johnson because you're thinking about Spurs' recruitment in the summer and we probably need to go and sign another winger because Son is getting over the hill. But again, how sharp did he look on Saturday when he had a week off? And if you've got that kind of winger that is Spurs are able to play the ball in behind to Son quickly, he can stand up a defender and then Son always knows.
I wonder if that's an Ipswich thing, by the way.
Probably. I think Godfrey's positioning for some of the goals wasn't great, and then you got Dara O'Shea kind of coming out, and it's like Son. But he did, like everything about Son on Saturday was far more sharp, just in terms of his touch. His touch has been way off. So I think it was a mixture of both.
Okay.
But I think if Spurs are able to go out and sign another winger in the summer, maybe the names that are getting linked with Tottenham are like Semenyo, Gittins at Dortmund as well, who's going to be a very tough task to get out of there. But when you think about Semenyo, you're thinking about someone who can add value on both sides of the pitch, like on the right and the left, and potentially play for the middle and ticks a lot of boxes.
It's quite a Spurs signing.
He's a very Spurs signing. And then it's probably an upgrade from the start on Johnson on the right. But then again, you've still got Johnson coming off the bench when the game's a bit more stretched to add that. Or do you go all out on a left winger who is going to attract 2 men to him every time? And if he can beat them, then Johnson's free all the time just for that kind of cutback. You don't want to play the same way all the time, but it's like...
We've also got Mattis Till and Solanke.
Yeah.
Because that was my final question was going to be Europa League final. Everyone's fit. Team's doing well. Everyone's playing well. Does Brennan Johnson start that game?
Probably not. Probably not. I think it would probably... Actually... I don't know.
The question is Kulusevski, really. Is it, do you play
exactly,
right,
or in the middle.
Yeah.
And then it's like, do you not play Maddison? Because I think, like, you're thinking about the locks in that Spurs team, it's going to be Bentancur and Bergvall in midfield. And
they're the locks?
I think so. Bergvall, certainly. Bergvall's been amazing the last few months. He's just a joke. And then it's Son on the left, Solanke through the middle. It might be Johnson. It might be Kulusevski and Johnson. Then you leave Maddison on the bench if you want a little bit more. You want to either regain momentum back and re-establish some control. I think it probably is Kulusevski in the middle and Johnson on the right. Yeah, I think so.
Brennan Johnson, like they're not the same player, but there is a little bit of Pedro about him.
Yeah,
in terms of, like you say, that kind of final action moments and just popping up in the right places to get on the end of things. And also, we've got to that point with him where I kind of trust him in front of goal.
Yeah,
and not just first time finishes as you say, bread and butter, but even when he has the time to take it, if you're running through, and I always just think this about, often your number 9 is not the player you want running through one-on-one.
Yeah.
And Fulham used to have this we used to have Lucas Piazon. And I used to love it when Lucas Piazon was running through on goal because I knew that Lucas Piazon would score, whereas I never really backed anyone else to.
Yeah.
Bobby De Cordova-Reid, not the best goal scorer in the world, but one-on-one with the keeper, he's going to score a goal. Alexander Mitrovic will miss. Absolutely no doubt whatsoever. And it's just some players have that knack of being able to do it. And Pedro was one of those players. And I feel like Brennan Johnson might just be one as well. I think
so. Last season, it was about he had got decent numbers last season. It was about the assist. Again, it was about that kind of first-time cutback ball to Werner at the back post, Son at the back post, someone sitting on the penalty spot. This season, it is about the goals. He missed quite a lot of those chances right in front of the goal last year where he just couldn't quite sort his feet out. But now it's like he actually said in an interview that I've watched so much of Raheem Sterling, I've done so much kind of analysis on like where to be and first time finishing, and then it's just all and right foot and left foot as well. He's so comfortable on both of those. Just cut it back to me, and I'm just going to hit it, and it's going to go in the corner every time, or I'm going to beat the goalkeeper. And it's just like that knack for goal scoring is just something you can't. And I feel totally the same. I would feel more trust in Johnson running through on goal than Solanke. I love Solanke. He's been brilliant for us, but it's like
I know you mean
he's not that kind of striker. You want Johnson running through, or you want Son obviously running through as well. So it's definitely the same with us.
Boys, absolute joy. Absolute joy chatting to you both. Thanks so much. Guys, well, actually, let's do it properly. Jack, where can people find you?
I'm on the Ranks FC podcast, which you can find on any good podcast app, like Spotify.
Yep, RANKS. So, like, as if you can't spell the word ranks, but now you can. Go find it. Ben, where can people find you?
YouTube, TikTok, just search my name, FC Bottle Job Podcast as well.
Yeah, new pod.
Yeah, just new pod, and Darren doing Spurs Podcast as well. So
good stuff. Right, boys. Thank you so much. Guys, make sure you check out the first podcast from this week and all of our podcasts because they're all bloody good. Follow us and leave a review if you'd like to and give us 5 stars. All the good things. Press all the buttons. Thanks for listening.